Yoga taking over the world, one down dog at a time. So, let's begin though. We will get started. But before we do, actually, is anyone brand spanking new to this class, never taken it before? Awesome. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I'll keep that in mind when I do the headstand part. So the 20-minute headstand in the middle of the room with no props and spikes on either side of you. So let's get started. Let's find a comfortable seated posture. Taking a moment to adjust our legs and body so that we have a sense of being grounded through the base of the posture. Feeling a connection to the floor through the mat and through any other things we may be sitting on. Feeling that deep connection from the sitting bones down. Stability in the lower body so that the upper body begins to rise off that stable base. Feeling lightness as we progressively rise through the vertebral bodies. Shoulders working to relax down. And the head and neck light on the column of the spine. The eyes opened or closed, connecting into that quality of dignity. And we use as our touchstone the quote from Dag Hammarskjöld, "The only kind of dignity that is genuine is that which is undiminished by the indifference of others." So this dignity has a self-generative quality. It is arising independent of our external condition and circumstances. It is, in a sense, original and innate. From here, we take the hands to the hip crease, the fingertips facing in, the elbows opening out for an opening bow. Feeling this position of the arms increasing the quality of our dignity by expanding and opening the heart without stiffening it and strengthening the back without hardening it. And then slowly inclining the body forward. And coming up. So, releasing from the seated pose, we now come into our first preparatory pose, butterfly. So please begin by taking the soles of your feet together with a generous distance between the hips and the heels, so that you feel a dull but persistent tug in the inner thighs, feeling free to work the knees towards the floor slightly through the action of the outer hip muscles. And then starting to bring yourself forward as much as you can until stuck in the tightnesses and architecture of the body, we simply relax forward, allowing the head and neck to assume a natural position. The hands as well, feeling freed from any preconceived alignment. Instead, we simply adopt a comfortable and sustainable pose that allows us to feel the quality of deep pull in the inner hips, perhaps to a stretch and pull in the lower and mid-back. And we begin by attending to our first of 3 questions. Am I here now? So as we take the first pose, beginning to notice our natural tendency, or what seems to be a natural tendency, to be in the present moment, which is to say that we're attuned and aware of our own body, and its constituent parts, sensation, the breath, etc., and also the surrounding space. And then all of a sudden, as if it's an ingrained strategy, we're suddenly lost in thinking. So you're here, and then all of a sudden you're shopping, you're remembering something that happened before. You are, in essence, moving into a stream of thinking. And you stay in this for a bit until you realize that you're in a posture in this room, and then suddenly you're back, and the stream of thoughts are somehow cut off, and you arrive back in the present moment with your breath. And then you wander off again. So we simply begin by noticing not the wandering, because that actually is very hard to detect. You're usually just in it, and then you come back. But noticing the coming back. And when you come back, you ask the question, am I here now? And you answer that with a yes. Always affirming our natural tendency to want to be connected to the present moment, to want to be in the moment as it is. If you're newer to the practice, then we end each pose by chiming 3 times, and we repeat each of the 3 questions. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? And so you begin to come up and out of the pose, and you pause for a second with the legs as they are, experiencing the body coming out of the pose as well as staying in. And then from here, we'll come on to the abdomen for Sphinx. So please swing the legs behind you, and coming down to the forearms, the elbows. And starting perhaps with the elbows under the shoulders. And then if you find that that's too much, the elbows shift forward to help lower the pose. If it's too little, then with the elbows under the shoulders, you start to straighten the arms. If you find that the elbows under the shoulders is almost quite right, you might choose to just widen the thighs a bit, which will decompress your low back and sacrum. And finding your way into Sphinx pose. The second question, can I feel what's going on in my body? Which, again, we use not as a way to think about what we're feeling, but rather to feel what we're feeling. And we differentiate that by saying to ourselves, or noticing our tendency perhaps to, when a sensation arises, we label it immediately, or we start to narrativize it. So, good chance that most of us are feeling this pose in our low spines, the meeting point of the low back and the mid spine. And so we might say to ourselves, in response to the arising sensation, oh, I'm feeling something in my low back. You might nuance that and say, like, well, I'm a little worried about that sensation. I wonder if this is going to cause some problems for my back. You know, my uncle has some back problems. You know, I haven't called my uncle in a long time. Did I leave the stove on? And so you see that natural tendency that once we start to feel something, we typically then cause a cascade of thought rather than a desire to actually go into that feeling and really allow it to be witnessed and felt in a very complete way. And this can be for many reasons, sometimes because it's simply just a trait that we've never developed and therefore it's foreign territory. And for some people it's also an area where having felt certain things and having felt very acute and sharp things in the body, we simply have developed a tendency to think as a way to distract, in order to dull the intensity of the sensation or to inure ourselves from fully feeling and experiencing something that we fear could overwhelm us. And so we start the process in this practice of really getting back into feeling and experiencing the richness of feeling without filters. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So please come down and out. And particularly in this pose, you get to continue to feel a little bit after the posture is over. So stay with that feeling for a bit. Try to stay with it. Try to continue to reside in the feeling as it dissipates in all likelihood. Then, keeping your head where it is, keeping your head positioned, just simply roll onto your spine for the last preparatory pose, which is a twist to both sides. So coming onto our spines, we'll bend the knees, bringing the feet flat to the floor. And defining left as the area towards the entrance/exit to the room and the stereo cabinet, the blankets. We'll drop our knees to that side. And we'll take the opposite arm, the arm that is opposite of the movement of the knees, or the right, and we'll lift it up. And if you find that as you lift it up, it really doesn't go that far, that's fine. Just bend the elbow a little bit so that the back of the hand, at a minimum, can rest on the floor. The arm not hanging out in space as we twist. If you need more sensation here, you're always welcome to take your bottom leg and hook its ankle on the outside of your top, this top leg. This will create more leverage. And if you need less, then you can just lift the top knee away from the bottom one. This will reduce the level of sensation. And just residing here in the twist. Our third question: can I relax? And we might say that the second and the third questions are really closely linked. They in fact are very closely linked, and they happen almost like in instantaneous moments, one right after another. We feel something arising, and immediately we might say there's a moment before thought, before conscious thought, where we can impulsively and almost instinctually either relax and feel, or we can grasp in and narrativize. And so when we say, can I relax, it's almost a constant sort of loop between feeling and relaxing, feeling and relaxing. So can I relax is asking ourselves, can we just be with that sensation. We feel first, and then can we relax? And oftentimes, we are pre-programmed or we feel pre-programmed to think that relaxing is somehow easy. So that when we think about relaxing into feeling, we think that's a path of no work. And in fact, it's really very difficult work. Relaxing is the residing back in our kind of innate awareness and trusting in that in the context of perhaps a series of life lessons that have taught us not to trust our innate relaxation, that we have to be on guard or aware in a very sort of heightened and acute way all the time. Which is certainly understandable when you've got the woo machine next door. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? There's no greater contrast here at Spirit of Yoga than yin versus power. First thing in the morning. So as you come back to center, knowing that twist can be pretty strong on the spine, please take a moment to relax and move your body around a bit so that you can soothe any strong feeling in the spine. And then taking the other side. So if you would please, letting your knees now fall to the right, and taking the left arm up. And as you do so, allowing yourself time and space to modulate that sensation. So when you drop your knees to the right and you lift your left arm up, once you're settled, you can then lift the top knee up if you need less, or hook the bottom ankle on the outside of the top knee if you need more. In this supine twist. So the three questions as part of the three parts of this class experience in yin, three questions yin. The three questions provide a foundation for understanding and developing our potential to relax into all of the sensations and experiences that we might have. With relaxation not implying a kind of passivity, but rather a continuous openness and awareness of what is going on inside of us. And gaining some awareness and space around our potential areas where we are not as aware, not as attentive as we could be. So we use these three questions in this practice of them in these postures. It's really a foundation. They're a good thing to always come back to. There are going to be days when you're taking this class and all you need to do, or all you can do for the day, is really attend to the three questions. Because the space you're entering in yourself is very kind of graspy mentally, very tight. And the 3 questions are a practical tool, which you're also invited to take into the world, so that in any situation you can say to yourself, am I here? Can I feel what's going on? And am I able to relax a bit? Not judging yourself for not being able to answer the affirmative to any of the questions, but simply developing an attentiveness. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So please, if you would, start to come out of your twist and stretch and sort of reacquaint yourself with your spine. Take a moment. And then we'll begin the main part of our practice. Coming up, if you would please, first to seated and then to all fours for frog pose. Again? What do you mean again? It's the same sequence every week. Why are you surprised? Everybody, it's like that.
When will that sequence change?
Well, March. Okay. Every month. What do you...
I was not been here for the opening.
Please, no one pay attention to the woman in red in the corner. So, frog pose, which is a stretch for the inner hips. So,
Working on the urinary bladder and kidney.
Thank you, Kim. Someone's been paying attention. So what we're going to do is we're taking frog pose. So for frog, what I would suggest is that we have some space, but the end pose is from all fours, the knees spread out a little wide, and we can turn the toes out. This is okay for some people's ankles. If not, then just relax the ankles. And then we come down here. The intention is to widen the knees as much as we can. So most people, given our proximity to one another, will find that you're going to either rotate to face the long edge of your mat, or if you have a lot of inner hip tightness, you can just simply stay facing the front edge of your mat and simply widen your knees out into a very wide knees child's pose. If you do this and you feel a really deep tug in the inner hip line, then this is sufficient. For those of you who have more open hips, then you may go a little wider. And for those of you who have really open hips, have at it. Just sit there and be open like Denny's. Getting yourself set up. And if you're newer to the practice, then these poses are held for a longer period of time. So if you spent the first preparatory poses really proud of yourself because you survived the whole 3 minutes, the extra 2 will certainly surprise you even more. So please enjoy frog. And we relax here. So as Kim pointed out, thank you, Kim. Thank you for attending to what I've been saying this whole time. Is Kim the only one? Really? He's in the corner, too. He's like the furthest away from me in terms of geometric distance. He's point B on the triangle, on the right triangle. So, the 3 questions yin. Obviously, the 3 questions are one pillar. The other 2 are Buddhist philosophy and traditional Chinese medicine. And we use traditional Chinese medicine as a way to select our physical postures as well as to inform the overall theme of practice. And each month in this class, we are focusing on a certain area and a certain set of postures that we do for that month. And in general, a month consists of 4 classes just because of scheduling things. For example, there are some weekends where I'm out of town and we don't expect the sub to continue the main theme of the class. So generally speaking, we're doing these sequences 4 times. Maybe in some months 5. But it all balances out. So we're working, as Kim said, on the urinary bladder and the kidneys. So what does that mean? Well, in traditional Chinese medicine, there is a connection in some ways to the physical kidneys and the urinary bladder, which are the primary conduits of water in the body. But they also have additional meanings and additional functions that are unrelated to Western allopathic medicine. And when we talk about them, we're not really talking about the physical challenges or physical aspects of traditional Chinese medicine. We're talking more about the mental aspects. So kidneys and urinary bladder, and the kidney line, these are lines. The kidneys, the yin organ, runs from the foot up the inner leg and then up the midline of the body, pretty close to the center line of the body. And the urinary bladder, as a yang or yang organ, starts from the eye and works its way down. And in the case of the urinary bladder, it runs down the back and down into the hamstrings and the foot. So our practice for these 2 lines really are about some hip opening, back extension, and hamstring work because of where they run. So that's the common physical theme. And the sort of emotional or mental quality of the kidneys and the urinary bladder is that the kidneys are said to house our willpower, our ability to sort of be persistent, to be focused. And the kidney and the urinary bladder, being the recipient of the energy of the kidneys, is really about separating and releasing the qualities of guilt, resentment, jealousy, that emotional palette, and helping us to release and let go of those. So we're working with, in the kidney and bladder complex, channel lines, this idea of our willpower, our perseverance, our single-mindedness, and our ability to not be swayed away from those things or influenced by things like guilt or jealousy, which can often sap our willpower or cause us to misdirect that energy in the world. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So please, if you would, try to bring your legs back together. Yep, there we go. And then feel free to rotate yourself onto your abdomens, head facing forward for our next posture. This also will help you to open up and relax the knees and hips after them being closed and compressed. And our next pose will be Seal, or Sphinx Part 2. So, if you found that Sphinx pose, the elbows under the shoulders, was sustainable, then you begin to press the arms straight, and this becomes sort of seal pose, or the beginnings of a high cobra. For some students, the hands coming closer to the body, fingers turning out to open the shoulders, and then pushing the arms straight is very accessible. For others, Sphinx was a challenge, so you just stay here. Either way, the influence is arising in the low back and upper back, which is where we want it to be. The head and neck relaxed and simply abiding in the strong back bend, which is now influencing predominantly the bladder, right, through the contraction of the back muscles, with some activation and stretch of the kidney line here in the upper part of the channel. So we think about this idea of willpower in terms of how can we take action in the world. In January, we worked on a kind of energetic mate of the kidneys and bladder, which was the liver and gallbladder. The liver having the quality of constructing plans. It's considered the general of the army. And the gallbladder is the captain executing those plans. So it's about a well-laid plan, good idea, and a well-laid path to getting that done. And then the kidneys picking that up then keep us moving that plan forward. And the bladder complementing that by when we experience inevitable opposition in our action, we are not waylaid and distracted by that opposition. We don't become resentful. Well, as Tammy's kind of pointing out without saying it, we experience resentment, right? You are resentful. Let's be clear. You experience resentment, but your relationship to it is not one of becoming caught, enmeshed. So a very simple example of this can be that when we're, this part's kind of important, that when we're taking action and we experience a block, whether that's a person, a situation, our immediate reaction can be to become annoyed and resentful of that obstacle. Right? Everything would have been fine if that hadn't happened. And as we can see, that resentment saps the will, saps the single-mindedness, or it perverts it and redirects it. Have you ever noticed how you can be going along quite fine and then something happens and then all of your energy gets redirected to strategizing about how to ruin that person's life? You know what I mean? You just sort of all of a sudden, all of your energy gets put to, you know, I've got to spend some time resenting this person. I will not be able to move on until I experience that resentment. But one of the sort of advanced practices, we could call it that, of 3 questions process, is that when we come up against that feeling of resentment, rather than rejecting it or rationalizing it, which is both dangerous, we experience that resentment and then we relax around it. And so instead of becoming caught up and feeling the will redirected, we instead acknowledge it, and then we are able to basically, in the language of the urinary bladder, let it go. Or in the language of Frozen, let it go. Right? We're able to release it out and persist in our sense of direction. And so this theme of February about this idea of urinary bladder and kidneys is about how do we enact our plans in the world, and how do we relax and let go of those emotions that sap our willpower and our single-mindedness? How do we, when we come up against obstacles, not become diverted into a path and channel of resentment, guilt, or jealousy? And this is not just, 1 month of work. This is just really a beginning point. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? Slowly come down and rest. Taking some time here to just allow that sensation to dissipate in the body. It's an unusual practice this month because there are a lot of poses that are done unilaterally. In other words, we're doing both sides at once. And that can feel a lot stronger than a lot of poses done on one side at a time. So, our next posture will be caterpillar or seated forward bend. So please take your time, but come on up to a seated posture with your legs extended out in front of you. Now, forward bends can be particularly vexing if we have tight hamstrings. So feel free to begin with the knees very bent, right? The line of influence that we're going for is up the back of the legs into the spine. So this is a deep expression of the urinary bladder. And then also compressing and closing off the front of the hips, which is helping to contain momentarily the flow of the kidney chi. So from whatever starting point is ideal for you, begin to walk yourself forward and assess your posture by the extent to which you feel a pull through the legs and into the back, and the extent to which you're also able to bring the body as much as you can against the top of the thighs. We want to get the hip crease kind of closed off here a bit. And you simply relax here. And whatever posture creates a dull and sustained ache. When working with the hamstring, sometimes dull is hard to find. Sometimes it's always a little strong, and that's okay, as long as it's sustainable. You never want to be in a yin posture where you're kind of enduring. The idea of enduring coming from the root, meaning to harden into. We never want to harden. We always want to be in a position where we can soften. Which interestingly is also a kind of natural tendency of the body. So, for example, when we our muscles are designed that when they're stretched, the first thing that a muscle will do when it experiences a strong stretch is it will actually tighten as a protective mechanism. But then over time, when continuously subjected to that stretch, the muscles actually respond by relaxing so as to prevent tearing. And so even on a physical level, our bodies have a mechanism by which we relax to allow these strains and tensions to not injure us. So what we focused on this month is really this idea of being in the world and in our experience in the world. In the first month in January, focusing on, as the Basho poem said, a New Year's house cleaning, setting up some space. And now in February, taking a theme of January, which was the inevitability of change, and now seeing how we experience that in the world. And we sort of been using as a touchstone this quote from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, the founder of Shambhala Buddhism, from his book, The Mishap Lineage. An idea about fearlessness. So Buddhism, like other philosophical systems, has multiple traditions and lineages. And Chogyam Trungpa writes about one of the two traditions that he was sort of trained in. And he writes, the Kagyu tradition also developed a sense of fearlessness. We often find that relating with our own bodies and minds is a foreign situation as well. We are confronted with foreign territories constantly, again and again, all the time. We are always faced with the unknown, our death, our birth, our parents, our emotionality. Everything is always a foreign country. So you might say that we're spending some time this first part of the year, in the first 5-6 months of the year, really reacquainting ourselves with the territory, getting the map of the territory, the cartography, the geography of our experience. But also tapping into and becoming aware of what keeps us from really being able to feel and relax and to be present for a majority of the experience of our lives. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So coming up, taking a moment, pausing, stretching out as needed. And then we'll take a twist. So one of our only unilateral or one side at a time poses. And we take this in a variation of half Lord of the Fishes, or Ardha Matsyendrasana from Hatha Yoga. So let's start by taking our right leg and crossing it under us so that the heel comes towards the buttock of the left side. Then from here, we'll cross the left leg on top. Now, as we do that, you may find that you start to lean over to the right side. This is fine. Now, you may choose to begin dropping that hip back down, or you may not find that that's comfortable. You may not find that your knee can go all the way over. You may find that it can only go half of the way. So it's completely negotiable. Having established, though, this configuration of the leg, slightly crossed and twisted, we then bring our right arm around to the left leg and anchoring here with a slight pull. I'm being very specific here because we don't want to aggressively twist here. We want to instead begin to find sensation in the musculature and in the spine, and then we want to relax so that we're anchored without a lot of effort. So we've rotated, and then the architecture of the pose kicks in and we can just sustain it. The head does not need to be rotated back over the shoulder. The head can be at center, can even be dropped down towards the chest. Whatever works. So we're working with this space of becoming more connected and aware of our own space, our own body, and the space around us. And one of the key qualities of the kidneys is enthusiasm. And enthusiasm has a role to play in any sort of work of exploring that we do, or any situation that requires fearlessness. And enthusiasm, if I remember properly, actually has a meaning coming from Greek, meaning to sort of be filled with the spirit of something. To be, in a sense, possessed by the spirit of something. So enthusiasm can be said to be that quality of bounding into situations untroubled by fear, which is different than saying that we're fearless. There may be a quality of fear, but enthusiasm gives us the strength to do something anyway. And so the difference between enthusiasm and fearlessness and foolhardiness, sometimes the line is not very obvious, but it has to do with the quality that we discussed in January, which is that quality of the general and captain of the liver and gallbladder. That is the quality of good seeing, of good vision, combined with an enthusiasm to enact that vision. We have the vision, we have the plan, we have the map, the way we'll get there, and then we have the energy that allows us to execute. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? We unwind, and because this twist also involves the hips and buttocks, you may find that unwinding is a multi-stage process, not one that comes easily per se, and there's a lot of kinks to work out, but we take a moment and then we'll switch sides, so finding our way in. Not being terribly surprised if one side is very different than the other. One hip may be very open, the other hip not so much. This may be more uncomfortable. And so you just find your way in and then we twist. Again, importantly, not pulling aggressively on the spine throughout, but finding a good twist, and then relaxing the effort and allowing the architecture, the design of the posture to hold you there without a lot of effort, not a lot of work. On another note, that class is only an hour, so don't think that this is over. For those of you who are like, wait a second, I feel Shavasana. Is that Shavasana I smell? No, not happening. So we have enthusiasm. We have a kind of energy around this, around being in foreign territory, around doing things that are outrageous or slightly difficult. And as a touchstone, we've used another Basho haiku, which is, with a warbler as a soul, it sleeps peacefully, this mountain willow. Perhaps thinking of that as with this song inside of itself, with this energy of enthusiasm inside of ourselves, we can actually be on an almost daily basis at peace with our action in the world. Not because we did everything right, but because we did everything in spite of our potentially being very afraid of it. And that when we inevitably become waylaid by doubt or feelings of guilt around an action maybe not skillfully taken, or resenting someone who took unskillful action against us, or jealous of someone else's success, we don't push that away. We experience that. We really feel that quality so that we can honestly feel it and then let it go. One of the 3 questions practices that we'll do later in the year is a practice of using the 3 questions as a method for revisiting old hurts, in a sense. And in the space of the practice, really allowing ourselves to experience and potentially let go of that kind of lingering sense of things, working with what is generally speaking the aspect of the yang organs, which are the containers and releasers typically. Getting into, as it were, the kind of bowls and dregs of our emotional life. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So slowly come back to center, unwind, let the hips reset and reintegrate. Some movement might be necessary for that to happen. And then for our final posture, inverted butterfly, we'll come down to our spines. So come on down to your back. This seems promising. So coming on down to your back, and what we'll do is we'll start by widening the feet so that the feet are at the very edges of the mat, perhaps starting with the pinky toes, the edge. And then dropping your knees inwards towards one another. If the knees touch and it's comfortable or lacking sensation, then you can simply walk your feet out a little farther until you've maximized your internal rotation of your hips, reverse butterfly, which is an external rotation. If at any point you find that your knees are no longer touching and therefore the pose is unsupported internally, please reposition the feet such that the knees can touch. It's quite possible that some individuals will be able to get their legs all the way out such that the inner line of the shin of the thigh can be on the floor here. It's possible. Some people are designed to internally rotate in this way. And for others, it's not a reality that the body will be able to do that even with extensive stretching. Particularly with supine postures like this one where the influence is very light, there's a tendency, I find, that you just kind of fall naturally into Shavasana mentality, which is to say you just kind of either lay there or you begin to really disconnect from your body. And so still try to find some awareness, some complete full body awareness here. So this monthly focus that we have a different focus for March, is really building up our awareness, both of the postures of yin, the 3 questions themselves, the philosophical ideas of Buddhism and the mental, emotional aspects of the traditional Chinese medicine. So we're building up a foundation. Having built up that foundation, we'll begin to work with it through the second half of the year, applying it more rigorously to different situations. With what we might say is a kind of goal or intention of empowering and improving our own ability to act in the world, to live perhaps a little bit more fully, a little bit more awake. But no promises, no guarantees. Am I here now? Can I feel what's going on in my body? Can I relax around that sensation? So please begin to come out of this pose. Take a moment or two to stretch and move your body in a way that feels appropriate, that arises organically from the quality of your body in this moment. And then I encourage you to take, for a few minutes, not too long, but we'll take for a few minutes, just a restful body position. This restful body position corresponding to what is restful for you, rather than any sort of training you may have received through yoga practice. That is to say, we let go of the tyranny of Shavasana, the idea that we can only rest on our backs. So if that means on your side or sitting upright, or on your belly, whatever is most comfortable. Please find that pose. rest into it. At this point, no technique, no intention, just resting. Please begin to bring some wakefulness into your body without disturbing the restfulness of your body. Slowly, but inevitably, moving yourself back up to seated. Taking a moment to settle yourself in a seated posture that once again has the quality of dignity. Uprightness, strength that comes from the base, and an internal sense of rightness, of connectedness. And we end each class with a variation on a traditional aspiration, which we repeat together. After each one a chime, and then on the third one we'll bow. So the three aspirations are, may I experience happiness, the root of happiness. May you experience happiness, the root of happiness. May all beings everywhere experience happiness and the root of happiness. So we begin by taking the hands into position for the closing bow. Broadening our chest without tightening it, and strengthening the back without becoming rigid. So beginning. May I experience happiness and the root of happiness. May you experience happiness and the root of happiness. May all beings everywhere experience happiness and the root of happiness. Namaste.